This episode is proudly supported by Westholme Australian Wagyu. Whether you're a chef or just love going to restaurants, you know the best ingredients are everything, especially when it comes to beef. Westholme, based in Queensland and the Northern Territory, Australia, is working with the land to create nature-led Australian Wagyu. They steward 16 million acres of rangeland, guided by the natural ecosystem where cattle graze and forage on native grasses for the first few years of their lives. The result is high-quality Wagyu beef that reflects the terroir of Northern Australia. Westholme believe that when nature leads, flavour follows. Learn more at westholme.com.
If you go in there thinking that you're a bit of a mad dog and you're just going to eat this for breakfast and you don't have to really try, you'll probably fail. And then whatever comes your way, you deserve.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Being part of a team and running a multi-venue business is the dream of many, but what toll does it take on you and where does it leave creativity? Letting go is one of the hardest calls businesses are making right now. But how do you let go of something you built and move forward? Mark Labrooy is the executive chef of the Boathouse Group, co-owner of Wild Pie and Discovered Foods. Mark Labrooy, how are you?
I'm good, mate. Thank you for having me.
It's good to catch up again. Last time we caught up, you were with the Three Blue Ducks, the world famous Three Blue Ducks, but no longer.
No longer. I've decided that that's run its course for me. I don't really know what else to say. It's a funny one because you feel like it's your family. You've built this such a strong bond, and there's a very strong element of a brotherhood there, and it's no secret that Andy, Daz, and myself are really quite. There's a very tight friendship and bond there that's between us. Daz and I in particular, we've known each other for a very long time, to sort of go through the paces and to make that choice to leave to begin with, but then also to actually see it through and communicate with the rest of the team that was obviously pretty challenging. Met with a little bit of criticism from some. Daz and Andy actually were incredibly supportive. So and just could totally see where I was coming from. Some of the other partners had a bit of a different position, but I think you kind of just got to elevate above it and realise that at times there can be a bit of emotion in there, and yeah.
Well, I could imagine different responses from the key partners because publicly the whole industry were surprised by that, given the bonding and the team there and what you guys have built. But take us through that process. When did you start to think about the fact that you wanted to take on new challenges?
Well, I just had a bit of a chance meeting, essentially. One of my business partners had kind of decided, I need to work out how much I could share here. One of my business partners decided to kind of go on his own a little bit and reach out to some people around, potentially a potential collaboration or whatever. And then I was brought into the mix to have a chat. And when I sort of first met the guys at the Boathouse and there was this talk of collaboration. To be honest, I wasn't really very interested at all. I live in Austinmere and the Boathouse Group, primary campus is Manly, and we have a series of venues all along that the northern beaches and the peninsula there. So for me to travel from my place up there, there's a lot of travel involved, and I was like, this doesn't really make sense to me. And then AJ, so we met with AJ and Ben Collis, two incredible humans, I have to say. and they were talking about a space in North Wollongong, which is literally 20 minutes from my house, and and I was like, oh, mate, I'd love to see the space, like, congratulations on getting a site. Like, that was kind of my attitude, and they're like, oh, why don't you stop in and say good day? We're all going to be down there next Thursday. Why don't you come and have a look at the space? And I was like, yeah, sure. Like honestly, just feeling really happy for them, that they've got a good space and there'd be a good operator in there, but also a little bit like, oh, fuck, I would have loved that space as the Ducks, like that's a good spot, Anyway, I had a look through the space, and, AJ and I were talking, and he said, oh, what would you do here? What do you think? And, I sort of rattled off a couple of dish items I'd probably want to see on the menu and how I'd run the layout, and I was like, oh, yeah, all right, well, I'll kind of best be off. But before it, but what are you thinking? Like, what, I'm here having a look at this space. What do you think? Like, is this something that... And he was just like, well, mate, I'd like you to run it. And I was like, fucking what? Never, ever thought that was going to be something. And also, I was like, you cheeky bugger, it was kind of my first... reaction, and when I asked AJ, where was your headspace around that? He said it can go three ways. It can you tell me to piss off, and that I'm out of line. You say thank you, I'm flattered, but no thanks. Or you say yes. You consider it. You say yes. And he's like, what could be the outcomes? And then I was kind of having a think, and went down to the beach with the family afterwards. And I called one of the boys, Jeff, and told him what had happened. And he kind of got a bit pissy about it, and was like, how dare he sort of, try to poach you. And then I just thought about it for a while. I was like, has my time here changing? Like, do I just want to, Hannah's like really close to, Hannah was like 6 months away from finishing medicine. She's just finished now. And I was like this could be, like, is it time for a new chapter? Like, I felt like, I kind of lost my voice a little bit in the Ducks. I wasn't, there's some things that have gone on that I feel like we could have done a little bit better, and been together in that business partnership for a long time. And we in the Ducks, when I've got two we's, do you know what I mean? I've got like the we of Boathouse and the we of the Ducks. But at the Ducks there, it was getting tough, like the businesses, haven't performed in the same regard that they have previously, I think, like everybody in the industry. And, and it just turned into a very different space, and you'd know this yourself as a father, like you have such a strong responsibility to be able to provide, and I felt like I was just starting to move into that position where I wasn't actually able to provide for my family, and things were becoming, like starting to become into jeopardy, and then it wasn't a purely financial choice. It was also like, oh shit, like that opportunity there kind of scares me a little bit. And then, after having further talks with AJ, he was very interested in having me involved as like head of culinary for the entire group. There's, 10 restaurants under the banner with like a really big growth projection. And I was like, oh man, that even scares me more, and then I thought about my life in the Ducks, and it's very familiar and like fantastic staff, like such strong bonds with the staff there. It feels very much like family, but I didn't feel like I was overly challenged, and I've always had that attitude, like if you're scared of it, or you feel like you might not be able to do it, you probably got to run towards it, because that's what's going to make it better for you. And I have to say, mate, like, I haven't worked this hard in years, but I also haven't felt this fulfilled in years. I feel so happy. I feel so proud of what we as the Boathouse have been able to achieve together in such a short amount of time, and that the management team of the Boathouse has really made me realise what happens when you select the right people for the right roles. The guys that are, you got George McLean, head of operations. You've got Ben Collis, who runs all partnerships and marketing. Obviously, AJ as the CEO is an absolute fucking weapon. Phil Knight runs he's our CFO, and Sam Cousins, who's been in the business for the last 8 or 9 years, I believe. So he's seen that transition and what happened in the Boathouse over those years, but also the change into the new management structure. And then the Isaac brothers, it's a family owned business, and they're from Crookwood. I was born in Goulburn. You can throw a rock there. And, it was just like, whoa, this is really cool, but also, just very professional and motivating. And yeah, I'm even as I'm talking to you now, I've got a big dumb grin on my face, I'm loving it, I'm really, really loving it. So, yeah. And then just seeing that structure, Courtney Parriott, she's also involved, and she's just, there's just one of the most organised individuals I've ever met in my life, and you can see what happens when you take that dynamic, and how many different projects can be maintained, but also, the new projects that can be achieved. So it's been a real eye opener, big time.
You mentioned a little bit how creativity has been sparked and you've been enthused. What sort of impact has it had on sort of your approach to food and cooking and the structure of kitchens? Has it changed that as well?
Very, very much so. I think I had a very indulgent life in the Ducks. It was like, I'm going to basically put on whatever I want, and I think at times you need to listen to what the customer wants, maybe a little bit more as well. But then we've got this really interesting climate of our customer base. Our customer base's willingness to spend has obviously reduced. Those times in a restaurant now are definitely more for an occasion. Obviously, cafe trade will always have a role, but we're eating more cheaply. We're more frugal with our money, like everybody. And I think that if you're not, then either you've got a pretty serious inheritance, you don't have a mortgage, or you've got your head in the sand, because the cost of living is just out of control. So, and what we do is one of the first things to be dropped when you look at discretionary spend. So, it's made me be a little bit more creative with my food, not on the cheaper side, but resourceful, I would say. Still being able to play with some really nice ingredients, the Abrolhos Island scallops and, a bit of lobster and crab and all that sort of gear, but also, playing more in the realm of some pastas and, more salady items, really working closely with the guys at Parisi around what's in season to make sure that highlights on the menu. So we just get best bang for our buck, best flavor profile, but also, some competitive pricing. So it's definitely been a huge learning curve.
We, at the top of the show, mentioned that the Boathouse Group isn't the only thing that you're doing. Wild Pie. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Joe, Barrett, and Lou, and myself, and the guys from Discovered, we have built a factory in Beechworth, and we are we're in the process of producing a wild game pie and sausage roll range. So we've got a wild boar sausage roll. We've got a wallaby pie and a venison pie. It hasn't been released yet, so I can't really say too much more than that, but we've got some really interesting gave meat profiles for a pie and sausage roll business. Everything is all wild harvested. We kind of have that attitude of eat a problem, which is obviously what the guys down at Mono had run that big campaign on a couple of years ago.
How did this come about? I mean, it sounds extraordinary.
It kind of, Discovered was first. So Discovered Foods is a wild game harvesting business. We own the whole, we run the whole gamut, but we employ the shooters. They're harvesting deer at night time using thermal optics. Everything is headshot. The animals are then field dressed, which means that their guts are taken out essentially, but all organs stay. So heart, liver, lungs, kidney, all stay in the animal. They get taken to a chiller, and then there's a meat inspector that has a look at everything that comes through there. We decide whether or not it's going to be used for human consumption or for pet food. And that is basically determined by the way they've been handled by the shooter. So you might have we have a couple of crack shots, and very efficient shooters within the group, but sometimes the handling, might put them into a pet food category rather than a human consumption. And because of the amount of bodies that we sort of need to use a week, which at the moment is sitting at about 20 and 25 or something, we then make an assessment on those animals, from the meat inspector, and then what we'd like to use gets sent up to us at Beechworth, and we have a full butchery facility there, like a prime safe certified, all the rest of it. And we break those animals down into their primary cuts, and we box that up, and we're essentially a box meat business. So at this point, because we can't really freight that out of Beechworth fresh, we haven't found a freight solution for that yet, but we freight everything frozen. And the eating quality is fantastic. They're like, out of all the deer that I've ever shot in my life, probably 15 of them have been headshot, and the other 50 odd or 60 odd have been shot through the heart or lungs or whatever. And the eating difference between the two is far superior. The animal has no idea that it's happening. There's no stress or cortisol or adrenaline. There's, you've got a really, really superior eating quality, a great result. So, that got me really excited. And I remember years ago when I was hunting, I was like, why do people write these animals off? Like, why aren't we eating these things? And when you learn about the amount of money that's spent to culling them and killing them, it's crazy. There's approximately $40 million a year spent between the two states of Victoria and New South Wales culling these deer and leaving them on the ground. Nobody's eating them, and we don't have a caloric shortage in our world, but we have a nutrition problem, a nutrition shortage. So this is the most nutrient dense red meat protein, wild, organic, that you can get your hands on in Australia today, and it gets shot and left on the ground to rot. And there's a myriad of other problems that stem off from that, of, fox, dog and pig populations exploding. There's obviously, a lot of rotting meat and carcass on the ground. There is an element of disease that comes with that, a worm. It's just like you look at this and you're like, this is a completely mismanaged resource. And then along comes Discovered as these trailblazers, and these two young guys like Tara and Billy, and they change the game. They change policy, and they literally they changed the laws, and made it so this wild harvested meat is able to be consumed for human consumption. So, and when I was invited on to be a part of the team, I nearly fell over. I couldn't believe it. This is incredible. And it just really resonated with me. I obviously get a bit carried away, but
Well, it's very much in line with the way you approach living and food. You're very passionate about sustainability and wild caught food. You're a fisherman and a hunter as well. Tell us a little bit. Is there a story from fishing or hunting days that sort of really made a big impact on you and your passion for that?
I always, Dad used to take us trout fishing when we were little tackers, and you put a worm on a float down at Pejar Dam outside of Goulburn, and you'd go for a little walk, and if the rod was going off when you came back, you were pretty happy about things. I don't really fish like that anymore. I'm loving the fly fishing and all the rest of it. I'm off to Alaska in a couple of weeks with Yeti to target some fly fishing and do a little bit of blacktail sitka hunting. Yeah, I'm on Kodiak Island actually. I am losing my mind about that. And then I started to spearfish, obviously, and dive for lobsters and abalone and scallops and all that sort of stuff. And you realise that there's this treasure trove that's attached to being underwater, and on top of it, and then you get your first adventures of a boat. And there's a real freedom that comes with it, but there's such a reward also that comes from feeding your family. And I'm a chef, I think that a lot of chefs love that feedback, oh, this is so brilliant, you're so clever, constant fucking affirmation. So when you catch a couple of fish and you know what to do with them, you can be, you're liked. People like having you around. So, yeah, I think I've just kept with that. And then there's that whole connection with your environment, and you're watching the weather and you're understanding what's happening with the water temperature and currents and water clarity and all that sort of stuff. And I just feel much more attuned with my environment. And I think I'd rather be like that than just, head in the sand.
For those that are listening that haven't either cooked venison or eaten it or sort of gamier meats like that, do you have any advice on sort of how to treat them and the best way to cook some different cuts?
Yeah, so one of the things that really lured me into discovered was that the venison species that we harvest it's called a samba deer, and one good thing about it is it's the largest deer variety, so you get some nice good sized cuts that come out of it. But it's also it has a flavour profile that's very similar to veal, so it's not a very gamey product at all. It's incredibly lean. So we do cut, I've developed a burger patty, for example, or a mince blend, and we blend that with Provenir's regenerative farmer beef fat. So it's kind of taking the best of both worlds. So we developed a burger patty that has 15% fat content from this beef fat that comes through it, and it tastes very similar to a beef burger. The flavour profile of the venison of the samba deer, is really quite mild. So I'd say that it's closer to veal. I think that some of the other deer species, particularly in the wrong hands, can be quite gamey. If you shoot a ruddy fallow buck, that in the period when they're mating and fighting and carrying on, that's quite a pungent experience. But you target some of the, you target the smaller animals or the females, or the fawns, like the young males. You get a very, very good quality eating product.
I want to talk to you about letting go. A lot of people at the moment are struggling with their businesses, and some are making decisions whether to let go of a restaurant or move forward. Well, how did you cope with, even though you made the decision to leave the Ducks, it was obviously letting go of family in some way. How did you deal with it?
Obviously, there's a huge, emotional connection that comes with starting your own business, and all those years ago when we took the hoarding off the outside of the building at Bronte and we started, slinging breakfasts and lunches out of there, almost 15 years ago now, I never, ever in my wildest dreams thought that it would take me to here. I never thought I'd be talking with somebody like you. I never thought you'd do stuff on the TV or, be an ambassador for Yeti or any of that sort of stuff. I never, ever thought that was ever a possibility. So obviously there's an emotional point that's attached to that. But I kind of went back to one of the things that my race coach for motorcycle racing, Al Samuels, used to say to me, or he said to me one time at the racetrack when I was fussing over my motorcycle. I used to race road bikes, and I was fussing over the motorcycle, and he kind of pulled my arm, grabbed me by the forearm and just made me listen to him. He was like, mate, don't love your machine. It's a machine. Use it use it to get it where you need to go. And, I was racing in a 600 class, and he was like, this is a 600. Like, essentially, you want to use this machine so you can be racing in the 1000cc class. You want to use it to get somewhere. You want to use it to get better. It doesn't mean don't care for it, but don't love it. And it kind of made me, I kind of called on that a little bit when it came time to assess this situation, that was presented with the Boathouse. And it was like, I think I'm going to let go of the 600 and see if I can ride the 1000, and see how I go. And it was like, I feel like it's everything that I've done has helped me to get to where I am now. And I feel like I've done my bit in there, and maybe there's a little bit more juice in there to squeeze, but I feel like it was just time to go and sort of just go and ride for another team.
There's something you said a little bit earlier, which I really loved, which was, if something scares you, maybe you should jump in even harder and go for it. Do you have any advice for anyone out there that may be looking at a role that looks a bit too big for them, and, how they can step into it?
I think internally if you can do it. It might scare you, and it should scare you. If it doesn't scare you, I think that you might be holding a little bit of arrogance, or you just need a touch more humility. And I think walk towards it. What's the worst thing that can happen? And if you know that you've given it your all and you fail, well, then you know that you're not ready, but you've given it your all. And there's no chance that you're not going to learn from that experience. If you go in there thinking that you're a bit of a mad dog and you're just going to eat this for breakfast and you don't have to really try, you'll probably fail. And then whatever comes your way, you deserve. But if you give it everything you've got, what else can you do? And I just have that theory that if you try really, really hard at something, it's pretty hard to fail. If you give everything you've got to it, it's hard to fail.
That's amazing advice. You're in this multifaceted gig now, and you've got the exciting sort of wild foods thing happening as well. What are you loving about sort of your food world at the moment?
I'm loving the introduction of game meats. To be honest, it really seems that it's the perfect climate. We're all, you listen to one of Coulter Wall's lyrics. The pennies are falling short at the moment. I'm going to go from eating steaks back to eating beans, and I feel like economically we're in that space. We don't have a lot of pennies, and it's time to move. We're not that lucky country that's just smoking down T-bones anymore and lamb chops. We got to get serious here. And then here comes a wild game meat offering that is very sharp pricing or competitive pricing, and it's extremely good for you. It's completely nutritious, and it's just a time to look at it. And I've just been such a fan of it for so many years. So that really excites me. It's that time to be thrifty. You need to think. I think that's also something that's really interesting. If you unlimited budget is fantastic. You're just going to buy lobsters and crabs and go for your life. But I think it's when times are a little bit tougher, you gotta be a bit more cluey about what you're going to use.
Well, Mark, as always, it's an absolute pleasure to catch up, and exciting to see all these things that you're doing, and excited to experience the wild pie when they hit the market. Please keep in touch, and we'll catch up again soon.
Mate, thanks for having me on. You take it easy.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.